Welcome to Journey. If you see a UFO, who are you going to call? My guest, Peter Davenport, is the director of the National UFO Reporting Center Hotline, which operates 24 hours a day out of Seattle, Washington. And he is literally sleepless in Seattle because he answers the hotline, and he's my guest this evening. Peter, it's a delight to have another chance to catch up on what's been going on with the reporting center.
It's always nice to be back.
We want to talk about how long the National UFO Reporting Center has been in existence.
I think I'm correct in saying that the UFO Reporting Center in Seattle is the longest standing UFO reporting facility in the United States. It was founded in 1974 by my predecessor, Bob Gribble, Robert J. Gribble, quite a well-known ufologist, and it has been running almost continuously for the last 22 years, taking UFO reports from all across the United States.
Now, I understand, too, that some of these reports come from FAA, military establishments, sheriff's departments.
Yeah.
You know, your little orange stickers that have your phone number on them are appearing everywhere, aren't they?
They are. I think a lot of people who are new to the field of ufology might, in the back of their mind, perhaps in the front of their mind, think that the majority of UFO reports come from people who are maybe not mentally stable or don't occupy responsible positions in our culture. But that is by no means the case. We are constantly getting calls, most of all from the FAA. Hardly a day goes by when we don't get a call from the FAA about a report to them. Members of law enforcement, members of fire or emergency facilities, and so on and so forth. So we get reports over the UFO hotline from all areas of the United States, from people in all walks of life.
Well, I can vouch for that as a volunteer occasionally.
That's right.
I answered the phone, and we had a call from the FAA, and then it followed up with the actual reporter of a sighting call. You know, we call back. There's a lot of credibility now, I believe, because of how the media may be handling UFOs, finally.
Yes. In fact, there's been some very good coverage here locally in Seattle, both by one of the newspapers. Seattle PI did an excellent article on us. I have to give them credit because it was one of the first balanced, informative, well-thought-out articles that we've seen in a good long time, and we're grateful to them. That gave rise to a lot of other media across the United States. The article went out on the wire, unbeknownst to us, so the phone started ringing at 3:45 on one early morning, and it continued ringing for about a day and a half, people wanting more information. So we know the interest is out there. We're getting some very good coverage. We're delighted by that.
What do you think the movies are telling us about UFOs now? You know, we've had quite a flux of movies in this subject.
Yeah. Independence Day, of course, The Arrival, another one that came out about the same time ID4 came out. Yeah, I think they're inducing people to think about this subject. But one of the things I try to inform people of is that a lot of what people hear about UFOs in the media is fiction or confabulation of one sort or another. That's not what we do at the UFO Reporting Center in Seattle. We are essentially a clearinghouse for information that is as objective, as accurate, and as thorough as we can possibly make it, given the resources available to us. So there's a world apart, a world of difference between us and things like
Hollywood.
Hollywood,
Exactly.
absolutely, yes.
But still, it's bringing to the forefront an awareness, I think, that it's very healthy for us to have that awareness.
Yeah.
Is it your opinion that we have actually experienced a government cover-up about information about UFOs?
That's a very intriguing question, and I think I'm correct in saying that that is a question that intrigues me at least as much as the question of whether we have alien visitors on this planet with us. My impression is, the most polite thing I can say is, my impression is the federal government of the United States is certainly not bringing to the attention of its citizens what in the final analysis, if it's true, and I believe it is, if it's true, will be probably the greatest scientific awakening in the history of man to this point in our development. I can't give you a categorical yes on that, but it is clear that the federal government of the United States is not revealing to its citizens what I think some people in that government know.
It appears there are factions within the government, those that want to come forward and speak about what they know. And I've had a few of those on my show. And those that are still holding that information very close.
Yeah.
So even that's happening.
Later in this program, I hope if we have a chance to play a tape, we'll hear an FAA air traffic controller talking to two pilots about that very subject, about a UFO that had just been reported by two 747 pilots. I believe there must be factions of people in our government who know the truth about this phenomenon, as I think we are getting closer to the truth by taking call after call after call, every day of the week, literally, from people who are seeing objects in the atmosphere above the United States, which by all classical measures should not be there. They're not aircraft, they're not helicopters, they're not weather balloons, and they exhibit incredible flight characteristics, nothing we've achieved on this planet yet.
Tell us and the viewers how to look at an object in the sky and determine that it possibly is a UFO.
I'm glad you asked that question, because we take a lot of calls from people, well-meaning people, who just are not well-trained in how to observe something accurately, and most of all, the most important thing is to capture the data, to observe certain things about what they're looking at such that they can report it later and we can get the data on it. I would say there are a few simple things that everybody could do. First of all, I am astonished by how few people are able to find north, true north, in the night sky. Very simple. You look for the North Star. Another thing, people don't know how to use angles. They'll say, well, such and such an object moved about a football field length, or it moved a ping pong ball, or it moved an inch. None of this means anything. What you have to do in that circumstance...
for my geometry, maybe?
Geometry. I'm glad to hear
Finally, I can use it.
Angles are so much more important.
45 degrees, 90 degrees.
Exactly.
And those that move off at a really severe angle, those are beyond our capacity for aircraft, aren't they?
Oh, yes. That's one of the things that is really intriguing, is the reports we get from people who watch these things streak across the sky. In fact, later on, perhaps we'll talk about a system that will allow us to detect UFOs in the Earth's atmosphere because they move at such a high rate of speed. They leave an ionized tail behind them. I think we'll be able to detect that in the future. But yes, being able to report accurately is very important, and it leads me to one other observation. We human beings are not good reporters of factual information. It's just not our style. We're much more emotional. We like to use symbols and images. But when it comes to reporting a UFO sighting, that information is so very important. You need things to compare the object you've seen with, so you can tell relative size and so on and so forth. But what I was going to say is the most important thing to do is not call the hotline in Seattle. The most important thing for a person to do who thinks he or she may have seen something unusual is write down the facts soon after the event. That is the most important single thing that they can do.
Peter, tell me, what kind of reports do you get, and how do you like for them to come in?
We get some good ones. In fact, I have a few examples here. Here is an example of an excellent report we received from a sighting last August of 1995. We took a number of reports about this object that passed over the western end of Pennsylvania. From north to south, it was reported all along the way, and for some while, we thought it was a meteorite or a meteor passing overhead. Later, several days later, we got a report from a professional race car driver who saw the object hovering in a lonely valley in southern Pennsylvania.
Meteors don't hover,
It's a rare meteor or meteorite that would be seen hovering 50 or 100 feet off the ground. This is a very good example of the type of report we get.
Get your crayons out, just your magic markers. Just show us what you saw, right?
Here's another good one we received. This was back in January of 1995. This is from a little closer at home. This was an object that was reported from the southwest corner of Washington State. A young mother with about 5 or 6 children in her car were driving across a road in the middle of a wheat field, and they saw 3 of these objects coming directly at them. They reported that it passed right overhead. One of the interesting things about this report is that when the mother was describing over the telephone what they had just seen, just about 36 hours earlier, you could hear the children in the background saying, "No, no, Mommy, it was black." And the ventilator was on the bottom of it, not the top, and so on and so forth, which is, in my opinion, from my experience, goes a long way towards adding confirmation to the veracity of the report. It was a very good one.
Now, you mentioned this Pennsylvania report. It was tracked going across the state.
Yeah.
So having a central location for a reporting center really helps validate across states and
Yeah.
even across the country, huh?
There are many UFO reporting facilities across the United States. Most of them are local, regional, statewide reporting facilities. One of the advantages of having a national UFO reporting center is you can compare what happens in one state with what happens in another state seconds or minutes or hours later. And quite frequently we get reports of events that happen all across the United States. Here is a map of the incident that I was just alluding to in Pennsylvania.
Oh, in Pennsylvania.
It shows the estimated ground track of the object. It passed across Canada. It was reported to pass across Lake Erie. It crossed the shore in Pennsylvania at the town of Erie, and we had reports from these several towns that are indicated on the map.
See.
Map is provided compliments of a local UFO artist, Bob Fairfax, who has provided us with a lot of the illustration for this program.
Now, speaking of providing information, you have a website which collects the data. You do the reporting event summary by month.
We do.
And narrate it.
This is an example of the type of data that we put out for the public, and I think that is one aspect of our operation that probably distinguishes us most sharply from all other UFO organizations, is that we strive to release our information to the American public such that they may know what is going on. I have argued for years and years it doesn't do any good whatsoever to collect UFO data and then put it in a box and let it collect dust.
Now, I know for a fact recently photographs and drawings have been scanned in, so the web page is getting to be very visual.
This internet is a fantastic thing. Until a year ago...
You even have a link from Independence Day.
Oh, really?
So you get hits off of that.
I was a relative computer neophyte when I started this business, and thanks to some of the people who've helped with the hotline, I've been dragged into the 20th century finally. The internet is a fantastic device for releasing this information, and we are constantly getting messages, email messages from Yugoslavia, from New Zealand, from Australia, all over Europe, England, Switzerland, and so on. So we know that this data is being broadcast far and wide, and people seem to like it.
Very valuable.
I think
confirming,
so too.
And more than likely adding to the frequency now of callers calling in. They feel more comfortable calling in now.
Yes, I think it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy. People see the data, they realize that people are seeing things, they can tell from our reports and our summaries that many of these people hold very responsible positions in our society, so it leads them, if they see something unusual, to report it to us as well.
Tell me about one of the best reports from FAA and I think pilots, 747 pilots, and I believe we have a map here that we want to go to.
We had a very interesting report, and let me preface by saying many times people who don't believe in UFOs, don't believe this phenomenon is taking place, will say, well, why don't pilots ever report them? Why doesn't the FAA ever see them and report them? Indeed they do, and we're going to hear a tape here very shortly.
Good.
But this map is a summary of the reports we got on the 17th of November, 1995. This was a Friday night. We got reports from all up and down the East Coast. In point of fact, the evidence suggests to me that there may have been 3 separate groups of, let's call them anomalous objects. I believe they were UFOs. We got some very close descriptions, or people very close to them. And we'll hear 2 747 pilots report very soon in this program what they reported. But in summary, an object was reported to come down the Maine coast. We took reports from Yarmouth, York, Arlington, Massachusetts, from Fall River, Mass. At the same time, an object was coming down here, and this object was reported by pilots very close to Long Island, not just a few miles out of John F. Kennedy Airport. At the same time this object was coming down the coast, there were 5 objects reported hovering up over a mountaintop ranch near East Orange, Vermont, and they accelerated suddenly and streaked off to the south, according to the observer. And we had one very interesting report from Basking Ridge, New Jersey. A young fellow saw both of them, and we know he saw both of them because they were different colors. The object that came down the coast was blue, or green and yellow, and it was an immense yellow-white ball of light with a long, thin, green, shimmering tail behind it. That's what was reported by everybody who saw it and who called us. The objects over East Orange, Vermont were red, and there were 5 of them. And they were seen suddenly to streak to the south. We have one person, one very valuable report from central New Jersey, This young fellow was driving north on a highway not too far from Newark, and he saw off to his east, to his right, a big ball of yellow light streaking to the south, and slashing across his windshield, he said, was a streak of light which was so fast that if it had been any faster, he thinks he would not have been able to notice it. That's what happened, all at about the same time. Later, these objects were seen and reported, interestingly, from a U.S. Air Force base, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in Greensboro, North Carolina.
All right, so
they were reported down in Florida, and to bring it closer to home, to Seattle, that night we had some very solid reports of strange lights over Seattle. I still do not know what
that sounds like a
those things
countrywide
were.
flap going on.
Exactly.
We've heard of those sometimes where there's just tremendous sightings going on at the same time everywhere.
Yes. Yeah,
Let's listen to the audio you can share
let's
with
cut to
us.
the tape and let our viewers listen to two 747 pilots talking to the FAA in Arlington, Mass., reporting what they saw over Long Island, New York on the 17th of November, 1995.
Boston, 405 heavy.
405, got it.
We just passed traffic left wing, about 3,000 feet above us. What traffic was it?
This Lufthansa 405?
Lufthansa 405. We had opposite traffic on the left wing. Can you confirm that?
Lufthansa 405, negative. I show no traffic in your area within 20 or 30 miles.
It should be now on our tail, about 10 miles. We passed it just 1 minute ago, and it was looking strange.
And it's Peter 226 confirms that, yeah, it's just above us on our left-hand side about 3 minutes ago.
And what altitude does it appear to be at Lufthansa 405?
It was only 2,000 or 3,000 feet above us. We are now passing Saddle 260, about perhaps 27 or 290.
Lufthansa 405, roger.
Peter 226, we confirmed that. We had something go past us about 1 to 2,000 feet above on the left-hand side. Looked like a green trail on it with a very bright light at the front of it. We assumed it was an opposite traffic.
Skipper 226, roger that.
Just for confirmation of the 405 heavy, we are right now about 46 miles east of Hotel Tango Oscar Hampton, and the speedboat is now ahead of us or behind us, so where is it?
Lufthansa 405, the speedbird is at 12 o'clock in about 30 miles, 40 miles.
So that was not our traffic, Lufthansa 405 heavy.
Lufthansa 405, roger. And the heading of the traffic, was it the same direction or opposite direction?
Exactly opposite Lufthansa 405 heavy.
Roger. Did it pass off your right side?
Left side.
Roger.
Yeah, and the Super 226 confirmed that. It seems we saw the same thing. It certainly looked like an aircraft initially, but it may not have been.
We can confirm this. It was looking very strange with the long light in the tail.
Yeah, big bright light on the front and a greenish tail coming out the back.
We can confirm this, Lufthansa 405 heavy.
Okay, Lufthansa 405, Speedbird 226, thanks. We'll look into it.
Wait a minute, what help you?
Yeah, I'll let that, that's 32.
Hammond.
And Speedbird 226, did it go overhead, the traffic go overhead you, or was it below you?
It was overhead and off to the left, much the same as the lift tail. I actually looked about opposite traffic 2,000 feet above, that's what it initially looked like, but then it did have a very strong trail to vapor trail, which looked more like smoke, and the light on the front was very, very bright, and as it went past us, it seemed to disappear once it was about 5 miles behind us.
Speedbird 226, roger. Were you level at 29 at that time?
Yeah, affirmative.
Roger. And Lufthansa 405, how far off to your side did that pass, the traffic pass?
It was pretty close, and like the speedboat said, it looked like 2,000 or 3,000 feet above on the left wing, just 1 mile, and on opposite track. And it didn't have any lights, logo light, beacon light, or red or green light, only a white light in front, and with a long green light, looked like a UFO.
Lufthansa 405, roger that. Like I said, we had nothing flying in the area. You are just north of a military operating area, but the traffic shouldn't have varied out that far out of the area.
Must have been military, so the 405.
Roger. Giant killer tape on the 59.
Thank you.
Hey, you got anything flying out in the area?
Negative 105 turned over, 0300.
Well, then I just had a couple of UFO reports.
Oh, is that right?
I had a couple of guys that reported lights just going over their head. I had no traffic whatsoever in the area. They said it passed within a mile of them, like a 2,000 feet above them, opposite direction. They said it was like a white way out on a green trail on the back.
Huh. Well, it could have been a meteor or something.
Yeah, it could have been that, but that's pretty close. They say that it passed within a mile of 2,000 feet above them.
Who reported that?
Well, I got Speedbird and Lufthansa.
Well, we don't have the aircraft out there.
Okay, just checking.
All right, make sure.
Hello?
Well, it isn't often we get to listen in onto air traffic
No.
control and two 747 pilots
No.
that have obviously thousands of hours up in the sky seeing all sorts of
Yeah.
stuff.
That's a pretty exciting tape. We
Yeah.
got that from the FAA under an FOIA request, and that typifies one of probably about two dozen calls we took that night from all up and down the East Coast, people reporting the same thing. And I'm pleased to be able to provide a tape for our viewers such that they can now say that they've heard pilots report them,
Yes.
they've heard the FAA report
And they
the
use
same
those
thing.
words several times. Looks like we got a
Yeah.
couple UFO reports.
Yeah,
They
and-
weren't shy anymore to finally speak it out.
That's right. Let it be said that pilots usually don't report something that's not there. That's not their style, I think. And this is pretty good confirmation that something very unusual went by them. And let it be said, too, some people might be inclined to say, well, it was probably a meteorite. That's the only thing conventional thing that would fly in our atmosphere like that. There was no sonic boom reported. It was absolutely silent. People reported from the ground. And it was about the same altitude as the aircraft. So this is pretty intriguing evidence.
That was a good dramatic call. That
It
really
was.
was good, yeah.
And we're always grateful to the FAA. They've been, the only plug I like to make is for the FAA. They've been very good in either providing us with reports or putting us in touch with people who have seen these things.
Now, you keep a lot of audio reports. You ask permission first,
Yes.
when they call in.
Yeah.
And then you have a chance at your leisure to go back and kind of listen to, the finer details. And you can capture, too, that excitement of someone maybe for the first
That's
time
right.
really seeing something.
We are, usually when we get a good case, we just hand it off to an investigator. We are not an investigative body. We take the information and get it in the hands of somebody who can go out and talk to the observers. But you can tell a lot about the tone of a person's voice. Sometimes people call, they've just seen a UFO. We, in fact, one of the observations related to what the tape we just heard, a young woman saw a huge triangular ship hovering over an empty field in Lower Nazareth, Pennsylvania. You can still hear the shock in her voice when she calls the hotline to report what she had just heard. That's one of the elements of confirmation we use to try to establish whether this is a legitimate report or whether it might be a hoax or mistaken identity. She saw something very unusual, and that was just seconds after these two pilots had reported something over Long Island, New York.
Same area, so that's another good validation.
That's right.
Furthermore, she's calling from the East Coast to Seattle, Washington on her own nickel. It's not a 1-800 number.
That's
so
right.
folks are usually pretty serious when they're
Yeah.
willing to pick up and make a long-distance phone call.
People frequently assume that our hotline is a 1-800 number. It is not. We don't have the financial resource to be able to do that. Number two, it serves as a filter.
Yes,
If
it
somebody
does.
has seen a UFO, they're generally not hesitant to spend $1 or $2 to report it to us. So that's not a major hurdle in our getting information from these people.
So there are all sorts of avenues to report UFOs to you besides picking up the phone and calling.
Yep.
There's an email address we'll show. You've got the website. They can check out other reports.
Yes.
They can mail a written report and a drawing.
Yes.
If they get lucky and get a photograph or video coverage, we want to see
They
it.
can send it any way they would
Right.
if they get a photograph. We get a few photographs. One we have here is a photograph that was taken by a young lad in Hazlitt, Michigan. This was on the 2nd of April, 1995. He was lying on his bed looking out an open window, and he saw an object streak by his window. He rushed to the window, he happened to have a Polaroid camera sitting on his desk. He grabbed it, and he caught a second one going by.
It's great when they can do that.
Yeah, we don't know what this object was. but it is very intriguing.
Absolutely. Well, I want to thank you again, Peter, for sharing this with us, and we'll have
Thank you.
more opportunities to listen to some more audio tapes at another show, but you've given us a good idea of how to report when we do see something unusual and how to look for something that is indeed unusual.
Yes.
So
and
thank
it's
you for all
happening
that.
pretty frequently, we think.
Certainly is. So thank you for
Thanks
sharing
very
that.
much. Nice to be here.
Thank you for joining us on this journey, and if you do happen to see something, pay close attention, be a conscious observer, and then report it. Should your journey include seeing a UFO, this is who you should call. Peter Davenport, the director of the National UFO Reporting Center Hotline, who with a small group of friends and volunteers does man the hotline 24 hours a day in Seattle, Washington. And he's my guest this evening to talk about what's being seen out there in our skies. Peter, a delight to have you here.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here again.
I'm always intrigued at what you come up with, and I know we're going to be sharing some of the audio tapes of actual calls you get. And often you get them all night because you are a centrally located reporting center. And how long has the center been in effect?
The center has been in Seattle since 1974. It's 22 years old now. It was set up by a Seattle fireman, Robert Gribble, quite a well-known UFO investigator. He's been at it for about 40 or maybe 45 years now. And the UFO Reporting Center in Seattle has been running continuously with a couple minor exceptions since 1974.
And the fact that it is been running so long gives us a good database to go on now, and also it helps validate sightings as they cross the country, because I do know that that's one thing it shows is that, you know, Pennsylvania will call and you move right across the country, sometimes all the way to our state.
80 or 90% of the time that our phone rings, it has nothing to do, we believe, with a UFO sighting. But you're correct. There are a few sightings, relatively common, I guess, where you can track objects as they move across the country, and that's what makes it all worthwhile.
Exciting.
It's very exciting. Even for a seasoned UFO investigator, that's exciting.
Now, you were recently on our local TV stations, which was really good to see that, you know, finally we're getting some credible coverage
That's right.
of UFO reports.
Some of the local media are catching up to Journey on this subject now.
Yeah, we've had you for a few years now.
Yeah, we got some very good local coverage in Seattle. In fact, that coverage went out across the United States. A very good article done here by the PI, Seattle Post-Intelligencer, and that apparently caught people's attention. It's amazing to me that for 50 years we ufologists try to awaken the serious-minded press to what may be going on directly over our heads on a continuous basis, and it takes one small article to scare them out of the woodwork.
It's very powerful.
Yes.
I wanted to say, too, you know, you mentioned 50 years of ufology researchers doing their stuff in our own Cascade Mountains in the Seattle, Washington area. In 1947 was one of the first newspaper documented UFO sightings.
That's right. It was an event over our own very Mount Rainier that kicked off what we refer to as the modern era of ufology. In point of fact, we think that this phenomenon has been going on for quite some time. But Ken Arnold, a former Marine Corps F-4U Corsair pilot in the Second World War, was flying over the Cascades very close to Mount Rainier. And in fact, this gave rise to the term flying disc or flying saucer. He looked down and he saw a number of very peculiar looking objects. They were metallic in appearance. They reflected the sun and it gave off glints. In fact, that's what first caught his eye, as I remember the case now. And that was the beginning of the modern UFO era in the United States.
But isn't it true there's really been some UFO sightings far ahead of that time?
I believe so. In fact, I think this phenomenon has been with us for quite some time. That's pure surmise, but let me share with our viewers a few of the things that I have come upon and have been analyzed by others as well. This is a very interesting article that I found in the local Tacoma newspaper. It's from the 2nd of July, 1893. We're talking about events that happened well over 100 years ago over Puget Sound. What this article describes is a group of gentlemen who went out fishing over the 4th of July weekend. They went out to an island in Puget Sound, and they were awakened several hours later on the morning of the 2nd of July by a shrieking sound that awoke them all from a sound sleep, and they were startled to see a cigar-shaped object hovering over Puget Sound, giving off brilliant flashes of light, loud sound as I mentioned. And some of the more daring members of the fishing camp walked down, according to this article, walked down to the edge of the water, at which point, they reported in the article, the object spat out a column of blue water, the article goes on to describe, and rendered these people unconscious for up to 30 minutes. The interesting thing, too, is that not only did it render them unconscious, but it apparently stopped the pocket watches of everybody in the camp at the same time. Very interesting article.
We've heard some strange anomalies with watches and cars and radios and
physical effect trace cases. There have been a lot of those reported. In fact, there's a pretty good body of literature on physical effects of the presence of UFOs. Here's another very interesting treatise. We don't have time here, I think, to cover. This takes it back at least 500 years.
Right.
I stumbled upon this in the University of Washington library quite by accident. It was a book that was lying on a shelf. It caught my eye, and I had read that Christopher Columbus had reported a few interesting observations during his first trip across the Atlantic. A close reading of his diary, and this is a verbatim translation of Christopher Columbus's diary, published in 1930. So this antedates, it precedes the modern period or modern era of ufology. And in this log, they discuss burning branches of fire that plummeted into the sea. Their magnetic compass was seen on several occasions to swing peculiarly up to 120 degrees off of magnetic north, all sorts of strange anomalies. Later, just a day or two before they landed in the New World for the first time, the discovery of the New World, a day or two before, Christopher Columbus himself, and he writes this in his logbook, saw an immense mound of water rise out of the Atlantic. Can we believe this or not? That's the question. Well, my suspicion is we can, because these people thought they might even be sailing off the edge of the Earth, and they recorded in the rest of their logs in great detail some of the other things they saw. Tufts of grass that they saw floating on the surface of the water was of sufficient consequence to cause them to enter it into the log. They were recording very accurately. So I think
they were being very aware. They were being very careful at the time to watch out for everything.
I'm inclined to believe that they were reporting very accurately, and they had some very unusual sightings. We also have a treatise from about 1,000 years ago in China, in which they described some very unusual events. So I think this phenomenon has been with us for quite some time.
What would you say as far as information that is out there and available? There's so many books.
Yeah.
A lot of UFO researchers in your perusing, libraries and books and stores.
Yeah.
Who do you find most reliable?
Well, there's some very good authors. I like Stan Friedman. I think he set the high watermark in UFO research for this country.
Heavy into
perhaps
the Roswell
internationally.
investigation.
Yeah, he's investigated Roswell. He's investigated MJ-12, the flap over that. Frankly, I am not a fair judge of any of these issues. I haven't investigated them. Timothy Good, a British author, violinist for the Seattle Symphony. He's also a UFO researcher. He's written some very good books, Above Top Secret.
Right,
There are many, many good authors. John Mack, Professor John Mack, MD from Harvard's done a good one. David Jacobs, Bud Hopkins. They've all, there's some very good names. Anybody who wishes to read on ufology, he has a wealth of very interesting work to choose from. And there's some old works, too. The new books, in my opinion, are no better than what was written in the 1940s and 50s.
I occasionally go to these used bookstores back in the 50s, exactly.
Oh,
I
they're
find
wonderful.
some fascinating books on flying saucers,
That's
written
right.
back then.
The cases that we're getting reported to us are no different than the cases that were being reported 40 years ago.
Now, and I will say, the cases you are getting reported, you are putting on a database, putting
Yes.
on a website, you have an email address, people can surf the net, so to speak, and link up and get the pictures and the data.
Yep. For our viewers' benefit, this is what we call the sighting report summary. We do not release names, addresses, or phone numbers of the people who call our center. We think that would be bad policy to do so. But we do release a summary of each of the reports of significance that come to us. And this is an example of the volume of reports that have come into the hotline. Each line in this report representing
That's
one call, one report. This is about 16 months worth of the most significant sightings, and we try to winnow out those that we think are not accurate or maybe an attempt to hoax or so on and so forth. So that'll give our viewer an example of the volume of calls we're taking.
You're taking the calls, and you typically will ask permission to record them on an audio
Yes.
cassette.
Yes.
At the same time, you ask for a written report,
Yes.
a drawing if possible, a map of their location,
Yeah.
pinpointing the area in which they saw the sighting.
Yep. That's essentially what we try to do, is freeze the data and get the data sent to our center so we can enter it into a database and make it available to the American public. You're correct. A written report is, in many respects, much more important, much more valuable to us than the original phone call. We're glad to know that the event took place, but what we need are the data. We believe, we aspire to be an objective, factual reporter of data. If we don't get the data coming in, we can't report it out, of course. So we ask for a brief written report, no more than a page, usually half a page or even a quarter of a page is plenty.
Yes,
A drawing is helpful. It means ever so much more than words in many occasions. And a map. With a map, we can reconstruct where the people were, what direction they were looking. Then if we get a subsequent report, we can triangulate using two maps. And we can establish how far away the object was, for example, how large it was, how fast it was traveling, all sorts of things like that.
Well, let's hear an example of what it's like when you pick up the phone and you get a call.
Yeah, well, I look forward to playing these two excerpts from UFO reports. They exemplify several things. One is many people believe that UFOs are seen over only rural areas. That's not the case. We're going to play two tapes. One, a sighting over Cape Canaveral on the 8th of May, 1996. This is a recent case. The second one we'll be playing is a sighting over Phoenix, Arizona the next day. And they describe two different types of ships. Let's play the first one and let our viewers hear what it's like to take a UFO report from Cape Canaveral. Here's the first one. It's about 1 minute and 20 seconds long, I think.
Today at 5/7, at 96 at about roughly between 2 and 3 sometime, I saw like over Cape Kennedy, way up high, I saw like 6 total triangular, so to speak, shaped objects. One was staying away from the group a little ways, and the others were making all kinds of weird movements laterally up and down, and they would group up together in the shape of like a V, a perpendicular line, and different kinds of lines. And I watched them for about 4 minutes, and then all of a sudden they moved to the west. the only way you could really get a real good look at them is when they move in a formation and the sunlight would reflect off of them. And then they moved to the west and then disappeared. But a couple times they moved, like it looked like 3 feet, which must have been a long way, real fast, and they would almost like come to not a complete stop, but would change direction and either go up and down in a group, with one kind of standing off by itself. And then when they all left, the one that was standing off by itself grouped up with them, and they disappeared. And then at about 10 minutes later, I noticed a big, like jet flying real high with a white tail behind it. And I called Cape Kennedy, I called the Air Force, and no one reported anything. But I wanted to go ahead and give this report, and thank you for your time. Bye.
It sounds like from that audio cassette report that he was observing ships flying in formation, and even one darting out occasionally. Does that happen often?
It happens quite often. That was a pretty good report. What we heard was his recorded message that he left on our answering service. I later talked to him. In fact, I've talked to that fellow 3 or 4 times, and it was a very good report. He was not the only one to see those ships. There was another young woman who saw the ships from a different vantage point, and it was a very interesting sighting. But he described a cluster of ships. At another point, I think in his report, he mentioned that at first they were very highly reflective, like they had a silvered surface. They instantly, all together, changed their outward appearance so they became a dull gray. And we're going to hear that same phenomenon again here very shortly with the next recording. A young woman who saw something similar, but a different shape over Phoenix, Arizona the next day. What we just heard was the 8th of May. Now we're going to listen to a report from Phoenix, Arizona the next day, the 9th of May, and let's listen to what a young woman had to say she saw.
Okay.
We start the tape and put a time mark on. For the record, it's 1600 hours sharp on Thursday, the 9th of May, 96. I'm talking with a young woman just called from Phoenix. What'd you see?
I was going north to pick my son up from school, and when I happened to look up in the sky, I saw what I thought was a plane at first. It was very metallic, and then on second glance, when you look up twice, it occurred to me that there was no wingspan. I mean, jets are long from nose to tail, but then they also have this incredible wingspan from right to left.
Right,
This didn't. It was cigar-shaped almost, and it was getting brighter as though the sun were reflecting on it. It did not appear to be moving. I stopped at one point, and it was not moving. It was just fixed in the sky in one spot, and it had no sound. But it got so bright, I was concerned I would have to close my eyes because it was starting to hurt my eyes.
It was that bright, huh?
And and it was, it's like sitting in the freeway with the sun on the bumper ahead of you. Kind of a blinding. And then, in a snap of a finger, and I mean just that quick, the intensity of the brightness was gone, and it looked almost gray. And then as I kept walking north, and I was on the far side of the street, so between my view of this object was the street and the block across. Does that make sense? And I had to pass in front of 3 trees. And I noticed that as I passed in front of them, there was little gaps between where I wasn't seeing it. And I started to run because I was getting excited, And when I got past those trees...
Yeah, that was a good report.
That was good. She got excited.
Yeah, you can hear the excitement in her voice. And again, that's one of the filters that we use to try to establish whether this is a good, legitimate report, whether the person's reporting accurately, or whether it might be a hoax or mistaken identity. But we heard several things there. Cigar-shaped, hovering motionless in the sky, did not have wings or any kind of empennage that you would expect of an aircraft, was very highly reflective. In other words, she reported no paint, no airplane logos that you would expect of an airline. Hovering motionless, it changed color. It went from bright, highly reflective to dull gray in an instant, snap, bat of an eye. And then it disappeared suddenly, and no sound. What was it? I have no way of knowing for sure, but it does appear to have been an anomalous object hovering in the clear, blue, cloudless sky over Phoenix, Arizona on the 9th of May this year. That was a
And,
pretty good report.
You know, we always surmised that sightings were most often at night. They're happening broad daylight, high noon, aren't they?
They are. They're happening all the time. And people often ask, are there more sightings or fewer sightings than there were last year? And that's a very difficult question for us to answer. However, one thing I believe I've noticed, and it would require statistical analysis of our data to establish this, but we seem to be getting more daytime sightings of objects than we did, say, in 1994 or 1995. This has just happened in the last 6 or 8 months, perhaps. It's a very interesting phenomenon.
Anything you'd like to speculate as to why or what may be happening?
That's out of my department. Speculation is something we try to avoid. We try not to overstep our data. We try simply to present the American public with a summary of what is coming into us such that they may know what we know. That is, UFO reports appear to be very real, and they're happening all the time.
What about callers that call in and may have had an episode or may have had an abduction or missing time? Do you get those too?
We do. A lot of people currently are referring to these as abduction cases. That may be a correct term. We prefer to use an interaction case because technically we do not know what happens.
We don't know really what's going on, do we?
No. We've had a handful of very convincing cases. In fact, one comes to mind instantly. The 28th of March, 1995 it was, so just a little more than a year ago. We got a call from Alaska, an individual, and I'm not going to identify gender. This person does not want to be targeted or identified in any way.
We respect that, yeah.
So we have to respect that. This individual described his or her experience in great detail, and it scared this person. I think I'm correct in saying it upset the individual. Weeks later, we succeeded, through the help of people who knew about the case peripherally, we got confirmation. On the 28th of March, 1995, and any of our viewers can confirm this for to satisfy themselves, there was an article in the San Francisco Chronicle about peculiar lights off the coast of California near the Golden Gate Bridge. The same night, there was a major sighting near Florence, Oregon, that was reported in the Salem, Oregon newspaper. So apparently, if we can believe these data, objects may have moved up the west coast, first seen in San Francisco, then seen in Florence, Oregon, and then apparently they were up in Alaska.
And often, because you do get the calls from all over the country, you easily track those.
Yes. That happened on the 15th of March, 1995. I think we may have discussed these before. We call them the Ides of March sightings, straight from Shakespeare. He cautioned us to beware the Ides of March. We saw an object go from, it was reported from Florida, it was reported from Woodbridge, Virginia, it was reported from Westover, West Virginia. The next report we took was from the Missouri Highway Patrol. Highway patrolman and 2 officers had seen the same object for about 7 seconds. It then turned east. It went over St. Louis, where it generated about 2,000 calls to 911 in St. Louis. Was seen hovering over western Illinois for about 40 seconds. Next report from Jackson, Tennessee. There it was below solid overcast, and it belched out an immense cloud of bright sparks, and then it streaked to the southwest. We don't know the exact elapsed time. It's difficult to reconstruct, but my feeling is all of that took place in about 10 minutes. From Florida, Washington, D.C., out to Missouri, Illinois, down to Tennessee. That all took about 10 minutes, I believe. Unless we're talking about more than one object. We could be talking about more than one object, but that's what was reported that night.
You mentioned 911.
Yes.
And I'd like for you to point out that 911, if they get calls about UFO, they call you, right?
Absolutely. We get a lot of UFO reports directed to us from 911 facilities all across the United States. We are, the National UFO Reporting Center is now a member of what is known as the National Emergency Number Association. And this is a compilation or a consortium of many of the 911 facilities all across the United States. And we just recently had an article published in this journal, June of '96, about our facility. So people, more people than in the past, know about our facility, such that if they get a call, they will direct the party to us. Unfortunately, any time of night or day, so we have to be prepared to take those calls.
Now, and being prepared to take the call, sometimes when you need a little break, you know, there are certain friends and volunteers that like to man the hotline, and I can speak, you know, personal experience.
I might bring to our viewers' attention that Brenda Roberts has been one of those volunteers and done an excellent job.
I really enjoyed it. And this was one of the fellows that called on a weekend that we happened to be manning the hotline, and he followed up with a nice letter, written report. He even had photographs and video that he sent us, and it made the newspaper. Here in Prince Rupert, Intergalactic Tourists, they had an article about the possibility of visitors from somewhere.
It was the first time I've seen this newspaper. I'm glad. I'm just the director.
You're right. But at any rate, here, you know, it's being covered. And
yes.
I'm happy to see that, because it's information that, like you said, you're collecting it and just not speculating as to what it might be, just the fact that there's very strange sightings, anomalous things going on.
Yep.
And you did mention craft, triangular shape, cigar shape, reported over and over again.
Any of our viewers can access our website. We put our data in summary form on the website, and I invite them to go to the website and go through line by line, and they will see very quickly that there are all sorts of different types of craft that have been reported to us, or objects. And that's a rather intriguing thought, to imagine why they come in so many different shapes and varieties and colors, and why they do so many different things. It's really, in my opinion, very interesting food for thought. What does all of this mean? Do we really live in a galaxy that is as crowded as our data suggests it might be, with intelligent life?
Of many varieties.
Right. This is not the type of thing we generally do at the hotline in Seattle, but it's interesting to muse on that point.
Well, you're putting the data out there for the people to muse upon.
That's right.
And I think bringing that awareness to them certainly opens up the possibilities.
Yeah. I think we're an educational facility. That is our principal forte, to collect data, preserve data, and make them available to the American public for anybody who wishes to access them. And we get some rather pleasant or pleased comments from people all around the world who say, we've never seen such a body of evidence in this field before. So that's very gratifying. There's no profit in this work, no salary even, but it's rewarding to get positive feedback, to know that we're having an effect out there, and we're providing people with information that they otherwise seemingly would not have access to.
Now, part of the information I noticed that you've collected, which may or may not show up on your one-liners, or even, now, sometimes you have much broader reports on the website, so they can actually go and read a lengthy report as opposed to the summary report.
That's correct. We have several cases there that we have gone into in greater depth.
Right.
We, what we do when we get a report, if we think it's a valid report, an interesting case, something other than just strange lights in the sky, we will hand the case off to an investigator in the area, either MUFON or Center for UFO Studies, MUFON, Mutual UFO Network, Center for UFO Studies, and there are a host of independent UFO investigators all over the United States. We'll call them up, or we'll contact them over the internet. We'll give them the pertinent data if we have the caller's permission to do so, and hopefully those individuals will go out, investigate, and give us copies of the report. We've gotten some dramatically good reports in that fashion in the past, and some rather interesting cases.
I'm looking forward to having a whole crowd show up one day and actually do, you know, a nice panel of a lot of people that have had sightings, and just comparing what it's like, and, you know, the different craft they've seen, and, you know, how it's affected them.
It's very exciting to hear people describe the same thing if they all witnessed the same object.
I want to thank you for sharing audio tapes and your time with us.
Thank you. It's been delightful, as always.
I want to thank you for joining us on Journey. Keep your eyes peeled to the skies, day and night.